Yo, what is up, guys? I'm going to be going over UFC 324, Justin Gaethje versus Paddy Pimblett. Let's get into it. So, this is an interesting title fight, just being that I feel like these guys are not even deserving at all. But, you know what I mean? It happens. UFC does this all the time where undeserving people get title shots, but I'll get to that. I'm going to go from bottom to top all the way through, giving my honest reviews on all these. So, Ricky Tercios versus Cameron Smotherman. I'm going to pick Cameron Smotherman for this one. I just feel like every time I look at Ricky Tercios, I feel like he's a menace to society. We do not want this guy in the UFC anymore. Look at this guy. Cameron Smotherman just has nice boxing, clean technique. I think he's going to get it done by that. Just if he can weather the storm of Ricky Tercios, I think he should have the dub easy. On to the next, Josh Hokett versus Denzel Freeman. I don't know why, but this guy got me cracking up every time I look at him. But Josh Hokett, by Make America Great Again. That's what I think he's going to do. I think he's going to, put his little MAGA hat on or whatever he does, and he's going to win it by just wrestling. That's how I think he's going to win. Because Denzel Freeman, whenever you get these 265 heavyweights, you're cooked, brother. You're cooked. I'm not seeing any cardio from him. Nothing like that. I'm going to just take Josh Hokett. He's on a run, and I don't know how far he'll go. Heavyweight, you could go far in heavyweight with not much, so I'm excited to see. On to this one, Natalia Silva versus Rose Namajunas. This is an interesting fight because they have it so low on the card for it being a title eliminator, and Natalia Silva is probably 7-0 in the UFC, something like that, and Rose Namajunas is 2-3 in her last 5. So this fight is interesting. I think Silva will take it pretty easily, just being that her strikes seem to be more effective and damaging rather than Rose's that are just, she likes to point fight to death. Like she has no damage in her strikes. Last knockout was in 2021 with that fluky head kick to Zhang Zheli, but Silva should take this. I just find it so weird that they have it this low, but she should have already got the title fight. I don't know why they have Rose fighting for this. This is just kind of stupid to me, but hey, man, this is WMMA for you. On to the next, Alex Perez versus Charles Johnson. I actually really like this fight. Both of these guys are pretty high-level fighters for the most part, and I think it's going to be a good scrap. I'm personally going to take Charles Johnson just because of the momentum, but I wouldn't be surprised seeing Alex Perez because he definitely has some, good hands. He has some just good all-around MMA, but I think Charles Johnson, just being that he's a little bit bigger, going to use the reach, and, he finds a way. He finds a way. I feel like he'll be able to hurt Alex Perez, and Alex Perez had that knee injury to Tatsuya Taira, and I think that'll affect him. Just he hasn't been as active, and it's gonna be interesting. It's gonna be interesting. I'm gonna pick Charles Johnson by round 2 KO. Round 2 KO. That's my pick. Atiya Gauthier versus Andre Puliev. I am gonna pick Gauthier because he is just so impressive to me. I think, being that he's so technical with his power, I feel like he'll be able to win this. I saw some stuff on Puliev. I think, his guard isn't good enough to where I think he leaves his hands down, and he might get caught in this one. I think maybe round 2 knockout instead, just being that, Puliev does have size comparative to Gauthier, even though, Gauthier has fought smaller opponents. This is like pretty equal size matchup. So I think Gauthier could easily pull this off. Just round 2 knockout, like how he found it in all of his other fights. I'm heavy on this guy. I think, he can make a run into the top 15, and I'm excited to see him develop because he has to be like 25, 26, something like that. So he's pretty young. Yeah, I'm excited for this one. I think I'm gonna pick Gauthier by round 2 knockout. This one is a banger. Umar Nurmagomedov versus Davidson Figueiredo. I am going to pick Umar Nurmagomedov. And the reason why is I feel like Umar's movement is going to be too much. I think he's a little bit better everywhere than Davison Figueiredo. Maybe, in some inside exchanges with the striking, Figueiredo could win. But I just don't think that Figueiredo's going to keep up with the movement and be able to move in and out like how Umar is. And, Umar with his kicks, being that he uses them as jabs. It's incredible. So I think Umar should win this one. I'm going to pick by decision because I think this one's 3 rounds, and I don't see Umar finding a finish, just being that Figueiredo's high level on the feet and he's high level on the ground. And, I don't think it'll be an easy path to victory just being for a finish for Umar. I think, decision is the way, just outpointing him, finding those long distance teep kicks and just head kicks in general. Like he can find those head kicks where it's not going to rock you totally, but it'll tag you up and make you weary of, moving on the inside without thinking about it. But there could be a world where Figueiredo, rocks him or, tags him with something good. We've seen Umar, get rocked. I forget by that one guy that was on like few days notice and he fought on like a carpet, and we saw against Mario Bautista he got head kicked. So I mean, there's a world where that happens, but I think being that he got rocked in the last one and knowing that he's fighting down in the rankings again, just trying to work his way up to a title again, I think he's going to be a lot more careful, shoot good takedowns, work his kicks very well. I think it should just be a 3-0 shutout for him. I'm going to pick Umar by 30-27 decision. Should be easy. On to the next, Nikita Krylov versus Busakis. I don't know why this one is above Umar and Figueiredo. I don't know if they just haven't fixed the bout order, because I feel like a few of these should be under Umar. But I'm going to pick Busakis. This was the one guy who Khalil Roundtree had, done that kick to on his knees, and he had that bad injury. He got back into the UFC, and he's on a real good streak now. I think his movement and everything in general is just going to be too much for Krylov, and at the tail end of his career now, I just think, he doesn't have it anymore. And I think we kind of saw it against Dominic Reyes where, Dominic was able to move and be a little bit more technical and just find a shot. I don't think Busakis is going to, do him like that, but I think it should be a victory for him, just being that, he's on a better streak. He's a little younger. So I'm going to pick him by decision, just simple stuff. This fight, I don't think it's going to be too crazy, but we could see a good entertaining one. On to the next. Michael Johnson versus Alexander Hernandez. I'm pretty hyped for this one too, because I just think that this is going to be 2 guys going out there just, wanting to make a statement. Even though Michael Johnson is damn near 40 now, I think Alexander Hernandez definitely wants to make a statement for sure, because he could work his way back into the rankings, and he's been on a very good streak recently. So I think this is going to be a good scrap. Michael Johnson always has a good scrap, quick hands still, and I'm going to pick Hernandez, just being that Johnson's age is not going to catch up to him as much. So like, I feel like he's looked good, but there's times where you see if he's not able to work the inside boxing as much, I think Hernandez can move in and out and just work his all-around MMA game on him, I don't think it's going to be where something like where Zell Huber is going to get, like, how Zell Huber was kind of just working his way on the outside too much and not really, finding effective shots. I think Hernandez has been in the game long enough where he could, figure it out and, work his blitzes in or work it, whatever it is, I feel like he's going to work it. And I think it should just be a decision. Alexander Hernandez, I'm going to pick him by. Let's get into the next one. Arnold Allen versus Gene Silva. I rate this fight highly. I personally think that Gene Silva is like pretty much damn near top of the division. Like, I think he could be fighting for a title if it wasn't for the loss to Diego Lopez, because that was very tragic. I personally think that, not to say it was a fluke, but it was the worst possible circumstances. I think he beats Diego Lopez like 7 out of the 10 times that they fight. But regardless of that, I think that Gene Silva will win this one. I'm thinking that it's just going to be kind of that he's tagging up Arnold Allen. I think Arnold Allen can work, some good boxing and more physical exchanges, but I think if it's just an outside game where Gene Silva's being more tactical, I think he'll be able to just work his teep kicks, work his jab, and find the two behind it. And I feel like he was kind of getting that rhythm against Lopez, and he just got caught badly. I hope he doesn't get caught that badly with Arnold Allen because I really do want to see him win, even though, you know, sometimes there's controversial stuff with Gene Silva. And this win was promised to him 3,000 years ago. We have to remember this. So he does have to make it to the top of the division again. And I really do want him to win because I think his game just is all around better, just everything in general. But I do love Arnold Allen as well. So it's tough to see any of these guys lose. But I will pick Gene Silva. I'm thinking decision because I know how tough Arnold Allen is, but I could see a world where, Silva can find a finish. Most likely going to be a decision, but I'm going to pick round 3 TKO. Just added up damage, finding different things, maybe find some elbows, maybe whatever it is. He's so, he's crafty with what he throws and should be a good scrap. I think this could be fight of the night. So let's get into the next one. Waldo Ocasio-Cortez versus Derek Lewis. I am going to pick Waldo Ocasio-Cortez. I think that, this is my Dominican brother. You guys know I'm Dominican, so I'm going to pick Waldo Ocasio-Cortez. I just want him to win this because I think we've seen Derek Lewis at the top and, it's kind of like, I think Cortez has the momentum and Derek Lewis is not on his way out because I feel like heavyweight you could stay in there for a while, but it's hard seeing any of these guys lose. Cortez is just funny as shit with recently, and he fought hella times in 2025, and Derek Lewis is just always the best to watch. So I don't know, it's rough to pick against any of them, but I think Cortez is just quick. If he can, work his 1-2 and, get in and out on Derek Lewis and, have some good head movement, it should be a good night for him. But then again, that's very tough against Derek Lewis whenever you're talking about striking. Nobody has an easy matchup against Derek Lewis in the striking, just being that he does not care at all. He's always going to be physical. He's always going to be in there throwing with you. It doesn't matter if he's hurt or not. He's always competitive in the striking. So I could see Waldo Cortez Acosta winning this one by round 2 TKO. I'm going to pick a controversial pick. Even though Derek Lewis is, and this is crazy though. 70-inch reach is kind of insane. But regardless, on to the next. Sean O'Malley versus Song Yadong. This is a banger. This is one of the most highly skilled matchups at 135, even though almost any top 5 matchup in 135 is going to be, highly skilled. This is still one of them. I think, it's going to be good seeing Sean in a 3-round matchup again, just seeing him be able to, let his hands go a little more and, find some rhythm early. But, Song Yadong is definitely a tough matchup for anybody in any division. I think, being that his game is so well-rounded, it'll definitely help him in this one, just being able to mix in the takedowns. But, Sean, I feel like his anti-wrestling is good enough. Obviously it wasn't good enough against Merab, but, obviously Yadong is not on that same level as Merab. So I think even if Song Yadong does try to grapple with him, and he does have slick wrestling, it's not going to be just that, he's going to shoot doubles with no setup. I feel like he could definitely work some boxing on the inside or, some kicks and find something where he could, get in there easier. But I just feel like Sean is going to be too much with his distance management and his reach and everything, and just work his striking, set him up. I don't think, the one thing with Song Yadong is that he does plant his feet too much in a fight, and he doesn't move around as much as you would like against somebody like Sean O'Malley. So I think it's going to be rough in that sense. And I think kind of what we saw with Cheeto, how Cheeto doesn't move that well and he kind of stands and he stands his base. He stands his base. But I think Sean should win because, you know, when you don't move as well, like Merab moved well, so Sean wasn't able to find the shots. But when you stand your base against Sean, he'll find the distance and he'll find his shots. And it's rough. It's rough when you can't move. I don't think that Yadong has the movement for that. So I will pick Sean. I'm gonna pick him by round 2 TKO. I think this will be a good one. I'm very excited to see it. I think it's going to be a good comeback fight for him. And, yeah, on to the next. We got Kayla Harrison versus Amanda Nunes. This is the last women's MMA fight ever. They're shutting down all women's MMA after this. This is the final boss of all WMMA fights. But I think that Kayla Harrison will pull it off. I think her wrestling will be too much for Amanda Nunes. I really don't think that, coming out of retirement, and I feel like that wrestling, it takes a different level of, physical attributes and, cardio. I don't think Amanda will be able to, withstand that. But the one thing is, if she can keep the fight standing for even 2 rounds, let's say, which is very tough against Kayla Harrison because her game is just really good to where, she could shoot any type of takedown and it'll work. But especially up against the cage, just being that, her judo background is so extensive. So I really do think that if Amanda Nunes can, defend the takedowns for one full round or maybe even get into the second and find some shots, that's where Kayla Harrison can get into some trouble because, her boxing is really good. Amanda Nunes' boxing is really good. She has some good power in her hands, and I don't think Kayla Harrison's is that good. She kind of, you could tell that it's not her main base and that she's kind of still even learning at this point. So I am going to pick Kayla Harrison, though. I just think that the wrestling is way different. It's too much. I don't think we've ever seen really a wrestler of this caliber in women's MMA. And I think coming out of retirement, it takes a different level of physicality. So I am going to pick Kayla Harrison by round 3 submission. I think that Nunes will put up a good fight on the ground. Her jiu-jitsu is good, but the control factor is a whole different thing. And it can even go to decision. I feel like, we've seen a lot of the time where we think, a fighter doesn't have the cardio for the 5 rounds, but, having the control and just being able to sit in a dominant position doesn't gas you out, like we've seen with Islam, like we've seen with Hamzat. So I think it could be the same type of game right there with Kayla, and she could win by decision, either. So I think round 3 submission or decision is probably the go for her. Should be not easy, but should be a good fight for her. On to this one, Justin Gaethje versus Paddy Pimblett. Paddy Pimblett is the biggest fraud of any person that's ever gotten a title shot. Even, I would say, Cheeto Vera deserved a title shot more than Paddy. But regardless of that, it should be an entertaining scrap. I mean, I don't even think these guys are in the top 4 or 5 of, lightweight. But, that's how it goes. We've seen it. It's whatever. I mean, I'm not too heavy on Paddy striking. I think, a lot of the times you see chin in the air. Sometimes he throws his combinations from too low of a point with his hands. His hands are not up. I can see a world where we have Gaethje, force a clinch and he's able to find one of those uppercuts and hurt Paddy. I don't think, Pimblett has versed the striker like Gaethje with that kind of power. So that will be interesting in that regard. But, if it goes to the ground, Paddy is definitely much more high level than Gaethje in that regard, just jiu-jitsu wise. I think wrestling, it should be, close to even, but, Gaethje's jiu-jitsu is just so trash. Like, every fight he's caught in a bad position on the ground, even against Fiziev. Like, how do you get caught in an inverted triangle against Fiziev? Like, that's it's bad. And he was able to find the takedowns too. Even though I will say that Fiziev's takedowns were slick, very slick, and they were quick. And I don't think that Paddy will be able to find takedowns in that same way. He's just not that explosive of an athlete and that slick. But he has more up his sleeve when it comes to, if it does get to the ground, he's able to find a great submission. And, that's one thing I will say out of this fight. That's Paddy's easiest way to victory. Just, kind of playing it on the outside, maybe using some kicks, leg kicks, even though Gaethje does have great leg kicks as well. They're a little overrated, but Paddy's really are, a good tool of his because he uses them more properly where he's on the outside and just working the leg and not really putting himself at too much risk, even though he got caught by that right hand from Michael Chandler. But I'm not really too high on Gaethje's, overhand right of where Chandler, he always has it loaded up and ready to throw. So is Gaethje going to have the right hand ready for when he leg kicks? That could be an adjustment that he makes, but I don't see it being, the deciding factor where if he lands one right hand that it's going to be over. So I would say Gaethje just has to not play it too carefully, but try to find just bad situations where Pimblett gets a little too comfortable. Just, we've seen at times where his hands are not fully up. He throws combinations from his hips sometimes. And, it's interesting seeing this as the interim title fight because if you watch Michael Chandler versus Paddy Pimblett, even though, after a certain point, Paddy Pimblett did look great with some of his game. Like, even though Michael Chandler telegraphed his entries a lot when he was entering, he would, do the same duck. I think it was in the third round, the beginning of the third round. He did the same entry 4 times and ducked his head right into a knee that Paddy threw. And it was kind of obvious. And I think people don't look at things like that when you're telegraphing. But in the same regard, Gaethje does the same exact thing. I'm not, even though Gaethje is a better striker than I think Paddy has ever versed, I don't think he's another level where, he's never seen something like it. Like, I think even Islam Makhachev is a better striker than Gaethje and just, as a full regard, using kicks and, distance management. I don't see a world where Gaethje's just going to fully outclass him in the striking. I definitely think he could rock him and hurt him easily because Paddy's defense is terrible. So I will get to the point of being that I think Gaethje can knock him out maybe in the second round, but it's such a coin flip because it's two sides of being that one person has the advantage on the feet and one person has it on the ground. But I will say if Gaethje could just not put himself in a dumb position where he gets rocked or hurt or, falls down into a position where he's not looking so good, I think he should take this one, even though the consensus is that Paddy will win this. Being that he's younger, more athletic, and just all that. So I'm going to pick Gaethje by round 2 TKO. Maybe even just full knockout, but I'm going to pick him by TKO. Like, unpopular opinion. I don't think people have Gaethje winning the fight like that, just being that he's already had his shot and lost it twice. So, I'm going to pick Gaethje because, it would just be better for the sport in general, just being that we can't have an interim champ like Paddy, and at least Gaethje would be good that, we could have him fighting at the White House, even though, because nobody wants to fight at the White House. That's the thing. So, be much better for the sport. Even though this is just a disgrace to the sport, you could put anybody in this title fight, it would have been better. You could have put Arman versus Holloway. You could have put whoever, pretty much, not whoever, but you know what I mean. It's pretty sad, but that's what we get. What can we do, So I'm excited to see it. It's a good card, nevertheless. I think that, it's pretty stacked all around, just top to bottom. Every fight should be pretty entertaining for the most part. They got some good names on here. Yeah, this is really exciting to see. I'm excited for it. Yeah, hope you guys enjoyed. I will see you next time. Peace.